On February 24, 1986, John Ruetten returned to his Van Nuys condo to find his wife, Sherri Rasmussen, dead on the living room floor. She had been fatally shot 3 times. The scene appeared to tell a specific story. A stack of stereo equipment sat near the door, and the living room was in disarray. To the initial investigators, it looked like a burglary interrupted by a homeowner. But there were anomalies. Sherri's jewelry was left untouched, while their marriage certificate was missing, and on her shoulder, a distinct, deep bite mark. Sherri Rasmussen had been targeted by a woman who loved her husband first. It was a reality that sat in the case files from the beginning, even as the investigation moved in the opposite direction. Sherri Rasmussen was 29. She was a nursing supervisor at Glendale Adventist and a clinical professor at UCLA, focused on critical care and teaching. Her marriage to John Ruetten followed a year of dating after they met at a party. By early 1986, they were 3 months into their life together in the Van Nuys condo, but the honeymoon period was marked by a series of disturbing encounters. Sherri told her father that she was being followed by an unnamed woman from John's past. This woman appeared at Sherri's hospital workplace to confront her, and once was found standing inside Sherri's own living room after John left for work. Sherri knew she was being watched, and she knew the woman was connected to her husband. But without a name, she was unable to identify her predator to the authorities. The woman was Stephanie Lazarus. She and John Ruetten had been classmates at UCLA in the late 1970s, living in the same residence hall and dating casually after graduation. To John, it was a college romance that eventually ran its course. To Stephanie, it was a preoccupation that did not end when John met Sherri. When John became engaged, Lazarus asked to be intimate with him one last time. John refused. He was moving toward a marriage, while Stephanie was dwelling on the past. By 1983, Lazarus became a uniformed officer with the Los Angeles Police Department. She distinguished herself as an athlete through physical tenacity during training. This is a .38 caliber snub-nosed revolver, the type of weapon Lazarus owned as an authorized backup gun. In February 1986, she used it to shoot Sherri 3 times through a quilt, leaving a bite mark before stacking the stereo to mimic robbery. The killer was a police officer. For the next 23 years, she would continue her career, carrying the same badge and weapon she used to stage the crime scene. Lead detective Lyle Mayer arrived at the condo and immediately focused on the electronics stacked near the door. He concluded that Sherri had been killed by burglars, who fled when the struggle became violent. This theory required the detectives to look past several contradictions: the untouched jewelry, the missing marriage certificate, and the bite mark, an injury much more common in female attackers than male burglars. Nelsrasmussen urged the detectives to investigate John's former girlfriend. He provided details of the stalking and the workplace confrontations, insisting the motive was personal, not financial. The LAPD dismissed Nels's concerns. Detectives officially told him that John Ruetten was not a suspect, and that the former lover had been cleared of any involvement. In 1987, the investigation pivoted toward a report of 2 male burglars who struck a nearby home. Detectives chased these new leads and created suspect sketches, but found no physical evidence connecting them to Sherri. The LAPD's commitment to their initial theory meant that while they searched for burglars on the street, the person who bit and shot Sherri Rasmussen remained on the force, working just divisions away. In 2001, the LAPD formed a cold case unit to apply DNA technology to unsolved murders. Detective Cliff Shepard was assigned to review the Rasmussen file. Shepard found that a swab from the bite mark had been collected, but never booked into the evidence room. He eventually traced a sample to a freezer at the LA County Medical Examiner's office. He noted the anomalies at the scene and immediately questioned the burglary theory, deciding to look at the people in Sherri's life. Natal compiled a list of 5 female suspects. He began collecting DNA samples from them. 4 were eliminated. The final suspect was Stephanie Lazarus, who was now a 26-year veteran detective working art theft cases. To avoid alerting a fellow officer, detectives used a ruse. They asked Lazarus to help them with an art theft case in a secure area of the headquarters, effectively locking her in an interrogation room before they revealed the true topic. The Los Angeles Police Department locked onto that theory immediately. 2 burglars were known to be active in the area, and investigators assumed Sherri had simply interrupted them, ignoring crime scene evidence that suggested a much more personal struggle. Sherri's father, Nelsrasmussen, repeatedly urged detectives to look at John Ruetten's ex-girlfriend, Stephanie Lazarus. Lazarus was an LAPD officer who had already confronted Sherri at her home and workplace, but investigators dismissed his concerns as the product of too much television. Detectives also overlooked a crucial piece of physical evidence, a bite mark on Sherri's arm. A swab of the saliva was taken and logged into evidence, but it sat in a coroner's freezer for over 2 decades as the case went cold. This institutional bias kept the truth frozen until 2009. It took the undeniable precision of modern DNA science to finally force the LAPD to investigate its own detective. In June 2009, Detective Jim Nuttall faced a systemic nightmare. His prime suspect was Stephanie Lazarus, a 26-year veteran of his department who knew every tactic and procedure he could use against her. Nuttall launched a covert surveillance operation to tail Lazarus without alerting her. This culminated at a Costco, where officers watched her discard a soda cup into a public trash can, and officers moved in to recover the evidence. Analysis of that discarded cup changed the investigation forever. The DNA from the saliva was a definitive match to the sample extracted from the 1986 bite mark. To bring her in, Nuttall created a ruse. He asked for her specialized help as an art theft detective, ensuring she wouldn't trigger her defensive training. Lazarus arrived at Parker Center, the LAPD headquarters, completely unaware of the real objective. She checked her weapon and walked into a basement interrogation room as the target. Stripping a seasoned detective of her weapon and her situational awareness was the only way to bypass her training and secure the room. Detective Daniel Jeremio began the questioning with a casual, cooperative tone. To any observer, it sounded like a deeply banal conversation between longtime colleagues. Lazarus freely admitted to dating John Ruetten in college and acknowledged her despondence over his marriage. She treated the inquiry as a routine background check, unaware of where the questions were leading. The tension shifted as the questions focused on her contact with Sherri. Lazarus nervously laughed, asking the detectives if she was on candid camera. The investigators dropped the facade. They confronted her directly, stating they had her DNA matched to the bite mark from the crime scene. Color drained from Lazarus's face as the room went silent. She realized the trap had closed. She immediately pivoted to survival mode, ending the cooperation and asking if she needed to get a lawyer. After being read her Miranda rights, Lazarus was placed under arrest. She chose to remain completely silent. The arrest was profoundly banal. A detective who had spent 26 years representing the law was now being handcuffed by the very system she once commanded. In March 2012, the trial of People v. Lazarus began. After decades as a police officer, Stephanie Lazarus faced a jury for first-degree murder. A linchpin of the prosecution's case was Lazarus's backup .38 caliber revolver. She had reported the weapon stolen to the Santa Monica police shortly after the murder, but never to the LAPD, and purchased a replacement just weeks later. The defense focused on attacking the DNA chain of custody. They argued the evidence was stored improperly for 23 years in a freezer. Specifically, they claimed a hole in the evidence envelope allowed external DNA to contaminate the swab. The jury rejected both the contamination and burglary theories. On March 8, 2012, they found Stephanie Lazarus guilty, leading to a sentence of 27 years to life. The conviction forced the LAPD to dismantle its own 1986 blind spots, using modern forensics to correct an institutional failure decades in the making. In 2023, Lazarus became eligible for parole under a youth offender law. She finally admitted guilt, claiming her actions were the result of youthful rage. The parole board initially granted her release, triggering a massive public outcry led by Sherri's family and Los Angeles District Attorney Georgegascon. This pressure proved successful. In early 2025, the grant was rescinded and Stephanie Lazarus was officially denied parole. The fight for justice outlived Sherri's father. Nelsrasmussen died in 2018, leaving his daughter Teresa to represent the family at the hearings. The family, the LAPD once dismissed as overly emotional, became the ultimate safeguard of the justice system 40 years later. The truth finally emerged from the shadow of the department. Sherri Rasmussen was murdered by an active duty police officer. For 23 years, the LAPD chose to believe in a fictional burglar rather than confront the reality of a murderer in their own ranks. If this case made you wonder who polices the police, subscribe. Next, the lead masks case, where 2 men put on eye armor and never returned. Some cases are closed, some are forgotten, and some were never meant to be found.